Good morning. I'm David Blackford, the children's pastor here at Antioch Church, and I have the honor of delivering the message this weekend in which we're entitling Family Weekend. I wanted to start today with a little object lesson for you, a way to challenge and encourage you as a leader. Since the beginning of time, humans have been preoccupied with their looks. Consequently, we have searched for ways to see our reflections and seek out available mirrors. The still water of a clear pool, in fact, was man's first mirror. The mirror reminds us of a helpful principle in life. People all have their own unique mirror, their followers, friends, coworkers, employees, children, the list goes on. This is called the mirror effect. And really, within 18 to 24 months of spending time in any one of those relationships, you'll find that you are responsible for the attitude in that relationship or organization. By design or default, you set the tone. While the speed at which you do this varies, any leader's example will eventually impact their relationships. Once this happens, those relationships become a mirror, reflecting the good or bad values and virtues of that leader. Rick Warren says it like this: if you want to know the temperature of an organization or family or team, put a thermometer in the leader's mouth. People do what people see. They are mirrors. The mirror effect is a perfect principle that people must never forget: the power of example. You can talk all you want about behavior and expectations, but ultimately, the life you model will be the lecture that gets through. Dr. Albert Schweitzer once said, "Example is not the most important thing about leadership. It is the only thing about leadership." Kids do what kids see. People do what people see, at home, at work, at school, wherever there's a leader. That's the mirror effect. Antioch Online, I want to thank you for joining us for service today.
In fact, our theme verse for the week is 1 Peter 4:10, and it goes like this. It says that God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. That's what it's all about. It's about us finding God. And then not just finding God, not just believing in him. He didn't just call us to believe in him, but he called us also to belong a part of this great family where when we come together with our talents and our abilities, we glorify God and we point the world in his direction. And that's what it's all about. It's all about that. In fact, every single one of us, I believe, is born with this "there must be more" feeling inside of us, right? Have you ever been sitting there, and maybe it was a long time ago, maybe you are completely flowing in everything Christ has created you for. Maybe you aren't yet. But maybe at some point in time you've been sitting there and you're saying, there's got to be more to this life. Like, I just know deep down inside of me where I'm at right now, there's more. I just have this drawing in me that there's more than just what's going on right now. And what that is it is this birth inside of us, this desire given to us from God, in all of us. This desire calling out for more. And that more starts with a relationship with God. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit today, this idea that there must be more to life. And when we have this feeling inside of us, this desire inside of us, this longing inside of us, this is what it does, because it's inside of everyone. It's inside of all of us. It causes us to venture out and to begin to search, to explore, to adventure, to test, to experiment, all with the purpose of answering this longing inside of us that there must be more. And Jesus shares a parable in the Bible that I believe is very similar to this idea of there must be more. And it's a very popular parable. If you've been in church at all, you've heard it before. And even if you haven't, you probably heard of this parable. It's called the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son. It's a very popular story. And I think that most of the time when we hear the story, we always think of the lost son as someone who is the worst of worst people, you know, right? They turn their back on their dad and they're like, I'm out of here and I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. But really, if you look at the way the story sets up, it shows this young man who goes to his dad and he says, I want my inheritance. What is he saying? I want the talents and abilities that you have set aside for me now. And it even says in the story, and we'll read it here in a second, that he takes these things. He doesn't even leave right away at that moment. He sits with these things, and then it says, after a while, he ventures out. So we're going to go there. If you want to open your Bibles to Luke 15:11, that'd be awesome. If not, you can just read it along on the screen with me. It says this: Then he said, there once was a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, I want right now what's coming to me. So the father divided the property between them. And it wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. Did you catch it? He asked for everything that God had come. Give me everything that you have come to me, which is the longing that God places in us. I want everything. I want to be who you've called me to be. I want to walk in that calling. I want to flow in that. Give that to me. And this is what he's saying to his dad. Dad, I want what you have set aside for me. See, that in of itself is not a bad longing. It starts that way for all of us. But as you see, it says he sits. And it's not long before he ventures out to a distant country. He takes off. It says this: there, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. And after he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through that country, and he began to hurt. He began to hurt. And this is where all of us find ourselves at one point in time or another. This is where I've found myself many times. See, even though I grew up in a Christian home, in fact, I would say that I followed the Lord pretty closely my whole life. I never went to a party in high school. I was popular, but stayed away from all that. Never smoked, never did any drugs, have never even taken a drink of alcohol. I was a virgin when I got married. So on the outside, you'd say, man, does he even need God? He's got everything together. But the reality is on the inside, I was searching. While I looked like I had it together on the outside, I was like everyone else, lost, saying, there must be more. There must be more. And so, as I've gone through this in my life, and with me it's been my insecurity, with me it's been my doubts, with me it's been this desire to know that I have this ability to communicate, but many times this ability to communicate, I take it into my own hands, and I say things that I shouldn't say, and speak in ways that I shouldn't speak, and end up with a lot of regret. Even now, between services, I sat there and thought about the things that I said last service. I thought, what should I change? Or maybe I need to be a little bit funnier, right? And what am I saying? I'm going to take the focus off of God and try to bring it on me. Even in between services, my mind was messing with me, trying to say, this must be more, take it into your own hands. And so you see, after all he had gone through, all his money, there was this bad famine all through the country. And this is what happens to all of us. We venture out, we test, we explore, we experiment, and eventually we find ourselves, everything's gone, and we find ourselves in this famine. Now, most of us have plenty of food to eat, but this famine represents certain things in all of our lives. It represents the famine of family. Have you ever made some mistakes or even treated your family wrongly and you try to come back and they don't want to have anything of it? Not this time. You're an embarrassment. It's the famine of family. Our family is not there for us anymore and we feel lost and alone. Or maybe for you, it's the family of friendships and relationships, right? You have all the friends in the world, but then when you make one mistake or this storm comes, they're gone. We find ourselves searching, and when we get to this place where we feel low, whether it's a circumstance of our own creation or the storms of life that are out of our control, when we look up, we find ourselves in famine. Famine of family, famine of friendship. Sometimes it's famine of finances. 10, 12 years ago when the recession hit, many of you went through it, and you lost jobs, and you felt lost, and this thing that you had identified with, this job that you had, no longer was there, and you lost your identity, and you're at this famine of identity or finances or the ability to care for your family like that. You find yourselves in a famine. I've found myself there many times, this famine of all seems lost. All is gone. What do I do? And it says this, he began to hurt because he's getting hungry. There's a famine. And it says he signed on with a citizen there who assigned him to his fields to slop the pigs. He was so hungry, He would have eaten the corn cobs in the pig slop, but no one would give him any. What is this speaking of right now? What do you see when you're hearing this picture? This picture is a picture of desperation, right? Like, could you ever picture yourself? Some people won't even double dip in here. Who's a non-double dipper, right? You know, some people won't even dip it where someone else who's a non-double dipper, they still won't even dip in there because it's just in case, right? Like, I'm not going to dip in there, right? You won't even double dip. And he was so desperate, he would have eaten the scraps that the pigs wouldn't even eat. That's desperation. See, all of us at some point in time in our life, as we are searching, as we are looking for this more, we find ourselves, when we aren't searching for this more in God, we find ourselves in this place of desperation, where we have not been satisfied. We still feel incomplete. We still feel like there's something missing. And eventually, it leads to our own destruction. We're lost, and we're desperate. Desperation drives us one of two places. It can drive you further down, or it can draw you back to God. That's where it draws us. That's where it draws us. So it says this, that brought him to his senses. He said, all of those farmhands working for my father sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me as your hired hand. Take me as your servant. Take me as your slave is what he's saying. I'll do anything. I don't even need to be your son anymore. And it says he got right up and he went home to his father. There's 2 people that are focused on in this story many times. There's a third that we're not going to talk about today, but the 2 main people that people focus on is first the father, right? It's the show of God's grace and his love, which we'll talk about in a moment, where God accepts him back, takes him into his arms. In fact, it says this right here as he's on his way home. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech. Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. So again, we see 2 people. We see God, the Father, running to his son, running to embrace him. But see, what's interesting in this story is this father was looking for his son. But the moment that God ran was in the moment that the son chose to turn. See, that son was sitting there thinking. The son was sitting there pondering. And then he came up with a speech. And he says, I'm going to go home. And he has this attitude that we want to talk about today. He basically says, even if I have to be a servant, even if I have to be a slave, I'm going to go home. And so you see him turn. And there are many moments in my life where I found myself at these places where I thought I knew what was best, right? I thought I knew better. I thought I had everything under control. Or sometimes when things seem a little heavy, I'll think like this. This happens to me a lot. I think, listen, God's got bigger things to deal with than what I got to deal with right now. You know, he's got bigger problems to take care of. There are people dying in other countries. He doesn't need to be bothered with this situation. I'm just going to do this one on my own. I'm just going to take it into my own hands, and I am going to walk this out. And maybe if God has time for me, he'll help me out. I found myself in that moment many times taking God out of the equation and taking my life into my own hands and taking control of it. Moments where I thought I didn't need any help. And every time I followed those actions, every time I found myself bruised and scarred.
Which was battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to spend much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. "What am I bidding, good folks?" he cried. "Who will start the bidding for me? $1, then $2? Only $2, and who will make it $3? $3 once, $3 twice?" But no. From the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. Then dusting off the old violin and tightening the loosened strings, he played a melody so pure and sweet as caroling angels sing. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, "Want my bid for the old violin?" And he held it up with a bow. $1,000, and who will make it 2? 2,000, and who will make it 3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and sold, said he. The crowd cheered, but some of them cried, "We do not quite understand. What changed its worth?" Quick came the reply, "The touch of the master's hand." And many a man with life out of tune and battered and scarred with sin is auctioned cheap to the thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, he's going and he's almost gone. But then the master comes, and the foolish crowd can never quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's brought by the touch of the master's hand.
I love that poem. I don't know if you've ever heard it before. And every time I hear it, it makes me just cry. Just the idea that in the right hands, it changes everything. There's so many times in my life where I've felt like my life is in famine and I don't know what to do. And really, most of the time I feel like that has been circumstances that are outside of my control. Circumstances that I had no fault in bringing about. Circumstances with my family and decisions that they've made, or situations of sickness in my life that I haven't done anything to deserve or even bring upon myself. But I find myself in this place where I feel bruised, scarred, sometimes empty, alone. And you see that in this poem with this violin and its worth by itself. No one even wanted it. But what changed? What changed? Everything changed when the master's hands were on the violin. The touch of the master's hand. The touch of the master's hand. And so we see this story of this son who makes a decision to come home. And then we see this moment that says while he was a long way off, the father begins to come to him. And you can picture this, right? As the father's running to him, all of a sudden the son sees the father. And you know what he does? He's looking for this speech that he has memorized, right? That thing that you've played over and over again in your mind. This time it's going to be different. This time I'm going to be stronger. This time I'm going to be better, right? You memorize the speech. You come to the altar. You say all the right prayers and all the right words. You have it all memorized. You've been thinking about it for weeks or months. You're like, I'm finally here. Right? He's been on this long journey, and he's finally back to his father. And he gets out the speech to read it, and it says this in verse 22, as the son is reading the speech. But the father wasn't listening. That doesn't sound right. Let me read that again. But the father wasn't listening. That doesn't sound like a good dad, right? You know, you got like this most important thing, right? This speech prepared to say how you're sorry and you'll never do it again. If you will just let me be a slave for you, a servant for you, Dad. And the father's like, what? Huh? Wait, just a second. And this is what he says. He says, the father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We are going to feast. And I love that dichotomy there, this separation. You see him going from starving, wanting the scraps that the pigs won't even eat, to now we are going to feast. And this is what God says to us. When we turn our lives in surrender, you go from longing for scraps of pigs to feasting. To feasting. This is that there must be more. It's not for the scraps. The must be more is God has a feast prepared for you. We're going to feast. He says, we're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here. Given up for dead and now alive, given up for lost and now found, and they begin to have a wonderful time. And you see here this son in his lowest moments, and you've been there before in your lowest moment with this prepared speech, this prepared prayer. And he says, and the father wasn't even listening, right? What would you feel like in that moment? You probably thought that about me before. You're talking to me like, are you even listening to me right now? You seem really distracted. And while my distraction is bad, God's distraction was not. God's distraction was not. His distraction was with the right thing. But why? Why was he not listening? This is what you have to ask yourself. Why? I mean, didn't the son need to say the prayer? Didn't he need to have that repentant moment with his dad? Why did the father not take the time to listen to the apology? What happened? And this is why. It's because, and we know this, and you've heard this your whole lives, actions speak louder than words. And you don't see it any more clear in this moment. See, we all have many things pulling at us: fear, insecurity, doubt, money, popularity, relationships, parenting, running a business, trying to take all these things, and they're pulling on us from all different directions. And they're asking us, they're saying, surrender to me, surrender to me. And there's so many times in my life as a father where I've been feeling this parenting thing, and I've raised my voice, or I've spoke harshly, and I've found myself saying, I'm not even worthy to be a father. Or I've treated my wife unjustly, or expected too much out of her. I've expected her to be perfect when I can't even come close to holding up to that perfection. And I found myself saying, I'm not worthy to even be a husband. I'm a failure at this. And I've surrendered to these wrong things. And in that moment, we have a choice of what we're going to do. And this is what we see in this son, as he finds himself at a moment of surrender. And what I would like to say, and the challenge to walk away thinking about here when we wrap up, is this: even if I thought. Right? You find yourself at the lowest of low, where you're willing to say, even if I have to forgive them, even if I have to let go of this past hurt, even if I have to break this relationship, even if I have to get rid of cable, even if I, students, have to get rid of my smartphone, even if I have to take the door off the hinges in my room. See, the question is, what do you want? Do you want the scraps, or do you want the feast? The feast takes an even if I attitude. And the son was willing to say, even if I have to be a slave. And it was that attitude that brought him to the table of the feast. I have a gun here. You guys ever seen Toy Story? You guys have seen Toy Story, right? What is that line that Woody always says? What does he say, right? You pull the strings and he's like, reach for the sky, right? Right? Or maybe have you ever seen one of those old cowboy movies, right? And it's the end of the movie, it's the climax, and the sheriff busts in, and finally the bad guy is sitting there, he's at his end, and the sheriff says, stick 'em up, right? Reach for the sky. Kids, can you do that with me? The kids that are in here, why don't you raise your hands and they say, reach for the skies. Or pretend you have a little gun in your hands. Come on, kids, let me see it. Say, reach for the skies. Oh, that was weak. Come on, kids, let me hear you. Come on, let me hear you, kids. This is your one time to shout in church. Come on, kids, say it with me. 1, 2, 3. Reach for the skies, right? And if you're smart, what do? Yeah. And you have two choices in that moment. Like I said, desperation. You can continue to fight. And in that moment, as the good guy has you surrounded, you have a choice. Do I surrender or do I fight? And that fight inevitably ends in death. But surrender leads to life. And what do you do when you see that moment of surrender, right? When you surrender, you hold your hands up. Why do we hold our hands up? Why in that moment does he want you to reach for the skies? Because he wants to see that your hands are empty. I'm not holding on to anything. A sign of surrender is saying, I lay down everything. And then what do? First of all, you lay it down slowly. You lay down slowly. You never take your eyes off the one you're surrendering to. What does that show? Surrender is always a process. You do it slow. Sometimes it happens quick, but most of the time, it's this slow trust. Okay, I'm going to trust you. I've let go of everything. I got my eyes fixed on you. And now I'm going to follow you. There's two parts of surrender that I want to show you right now. And the first is surrender of your mind. The Bible says in Philippians 4:8, it says that, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and what is honorable and what is right and what is pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. See, is that what you think about? See, what you see in this son, what is the first thing that brought change to this whole story? This is what we miss. We always picture God running to the Son, which is the climax, the most important part of the story. We see God's grace, we see his love. But where did this story change? It changed when the son was sitting in the pig pen and he had a thought. He had his thoughts low. I'm really hungry, this hurts, and I even want to eat this garbage. So he was focusing on the bad things. And then he fixed his thoughts on his father. Even my father's servants get treated better than this. See, the first thing in surrender is fixing your thoughts on God, because that, most of the time, is where the battle is won and lost. If that son would never have changed his thoughts, he never would have got out of that pig pen. And if he never would have changed his thoughts, he never would have been rescued by his father. He never would have experienced the father's embrace, but he had to choose to fix his thoughts. He fixed his thoughts. In Isaiah 26:3, it says this: you will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you. I love how it says that. You, which is God, will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you. It doesn't say you will keep in perfect peace all who have it all together, or all who have a perfect life, or all who don't experience any bad things, or the healthy. It says you will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you. And that's what you see in surrender, right? Right? I'm not going to take my eyes off of you, God. My eyes, my gaze, my thoughts are fixed on you. What do you want? What do you want? I will do what you tell me to do. I'm laying it down, and my eyes are fixed on you. My eyes are fixed on you. And you follow, not looking around, right? I mean, how frustrating would that be if the sheriff is holding the gun to him and says, stick him up, and the guy turns and he's like this. He's like, no, wait, I'm going this way. And sometimes that's what God is doing, is he yells, hey, I'm over here. And we're just like, I'm surrendered. But we don't have our eyes fixed in the right place. And eventually, if you don't fix your eyes in the right place, because the way the culture is and the environment that we live in and the battles that we face and the things that are pulling on us for our surrender, eventually what's going to happen? Your eyes are going to catch something, and you'll find yourself in the same place again. You fix your eyes. You fix your thoughts. Number 2, the second one is you surrender your will, right? You surrender your will. So many times in the Bible, as Jesus was ministering to people, when he would heal people or he would help people, he would say this question or ask this question. He would say, will you? Or he would say, are you willing? Right? He's asking the question, even if you have to give up this, even if you have to do this, and that surrendering your will is that slow motion part. I'm going to do everything that you ask me to do. I trust you, right? You put it down. I'm following you. I'm following you. When someone is operated on, you don't negotiate with the doctors, right? You're not like on the table and as they take out the knives, you're like, whoa, let's use a different one there, guy. That one looks a little bit too big. Let's use something a little smaller, right? Or they're operating on you trying to get rid of a tumor. You're like, well, just take out a little bit of it. I want to leave a little bit in there because that's way too much. I can't give it all up right now. As they take the knives out and put the anesthetic in you, you put your full trust in these doctors that they're going to do the right thing. You're going to trust that they're going to take out what needs to be taken out. They're going to leave what needs to be left. And their whole purpose is to bring you to a place of perfect health. And you trust them. And when we surrender our lives to Jesus, that's what it's doing. We're saying, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting that you're going to bring me to a place of perfect health. Cut out what you need to cut out. Take away what you need to take away. I give you and I lay down at your feet what needs to be laid down at your feet. That is what surrender looks like. And when you choose to surrender your life to Jesus Christ completely, it changes everything.
Today we've been talking about surrender and asking this question. What is your even if I? Well, I heard a story the other day of a man that was at the gym working out on an elliptical in front of a window. And this window overlooked the parking lot, and he saw this slightly overweight guy in a business suit get out of his small sedan, and he reached back in the car for his gym bag. Then he reached back in to get something else. It was a cup with a spoon in it. It was a Blizzard from Dairy Queen. And he stopped in front of the window, right in front of the man working out, and he polished it off before he walked into the gym to start his workout. I don't know about you, but I can relate to this guy. I want to get in shape, but sometimes I don't really want to make any sacrifices to do it. I don't want to deny myself. I want to get in shape and eat my Blizzards too. And this is how we respond to Jesus sometimes. We want Jesus, but without any sacrifices. We want Jesus, but we don't want to deny ourselves. But Jesus didn't give us that option. He said, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Some of you may have heard the term vegan before, but I doubt that most of you really understand what that means. It basically means this: you don't eat any meat or dairy products, none. No meat of any kind, no beef, no chicken, no fish, no lizards, no mice, no bats or rats, no meat, period. No dairy products, no ice cream, no milk, no ice cream, no cheese, no ice cream, no dairy, period, ever. Have you ever met anyone like this? They don't cheat. They don't ever fudge. They are 100% vegan, no expectations, totally committed. I, on the other hand, I'm what you would call a flexitarian. I'm a vegan at home with my wife Julia and much of the rest of the time, but I'm flexible and I eat what is in front of me. I'm a vegan except when there's a really good steak on the barbecue. I'm a vegan except when someone brings me some snickerdoodle cookies or cookies and ice cream. I'm a part-time vegan, basically. I'm a vegan with expectations. I'm what people would call a flexitarian. And this might be okay when it comes to diet, but it doesn't work when it comes to following Jesus. There are no part-time followers of Jesus Christ, no flexitarian followers. When we surrender our life to Jesus, it's our whole life. Now, that doesn't mean perfection, but it does mean continually asking the question, God, is there anything in my life that I need to let go of and give to you? Being willing to say, even if I have to forgive so-and-so, even if I have to let go of my fear, even if I have to give up always needing to be right, even if I have to give up my doubt, even if I have to get rid of my smartphone, even if I have to stop being a workaholic, even if I have to let go of my past hurts. This even if I list can go on, and it's different for everyone. But when we choose to be a follower of Christ, we choose to surrender. And while the cost of that surrender may seem too great, the reward is greater. Because he's not here to condemn you. He's here to bless you and love you and take you into his arms and say, I forgive you. I'll change your life. I have come so that you will have life to the fullest. And when you die, you will go to heaven. I'm going to say a prayer. And when I do, if you would like to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior and Lord, please repeat this prayer after me. Let's bow our heads. God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my failures. I'm sorry for my mistakes, and I'm sorry for my sins. Would you please forgive me? I surrender my life to you, that you would be my Lord and my Savior. In your precious and mighty name we pray. Amen. All of heaven is rejoicing because of the prayer that you just said. And if you said that prayer with us today, we would love to know. If you could just type Pastor, that's me, in the comment section. And you could also text Jesus to 97000. We hope you have a great week. And if you have anything that you would like us to be praying about for you, you can go to ANTIOCHChurch.com and let us know. We would love to be standing right beside you, believing for that miracle that you need to see happen. God bless.